Anna didn't drag Elizabeth Weber to the station in handcuffs. She escorted her the way a meticulous investigator leads a key witness into a room where the facts are supposed to breathe. Yet even before the formal interview began, the air felt thin. The discovery of a handgun in Liz's home had already transformed her living room into a crime scene and her reputation into a question mark. Sitting across from Anna, Liz recounted what had seemed like a bizarre, disconnected series of visits. Michael Corinthos showing up out of the blue with a startling offer, and Carly Spencer arriving under the cloud of rumors about a weapon hidden where Liz tucks away her life. To anyone else, these might be coincidences with jagged edges. To Anna, whose instincts are rarely wrong, the timing formed a pattern, one that suggested orchestration rather than happenstance, and urgency rather than care. It was Michael's appearance that rattled Liz the most. He had never been part of her everyday orbit, and yet he had materialized at her door with a proposition generous to the point of improbable. An opening for Willow to see the children, as if custody windows and family resentments could be softened with a single, timely visit. The gesture might have been laudable if not for the precise moment of its delivery, wedged between the PCPD's temporary departure from Liz's property and their scheduled return to execute a revised arrest warrant. When people with complicated histories arrive in places they never frequent, bearing gifts that fit a perfect frame, good detectives ask who painted the frame in the first place. News that a weapon had turned up at Liz's house traveled through Port Charles the way electricity jumps a short circuit, fast, noisy, and dangerous. Carly, upon hearing that both a gun and her son had intersected with the same address, felt the floor tilt under her. The panic that rose in her wasn't merely maternal, it was strategic. She understood how quickly suspicion migrates to the most familiar adversary or the most convenient scapegoat. She also understood that if Anna concluded the gun was a plant, the next logical question would be who stood to gain from its discovery, and who had access. That narrowed roster placed both Carly and Michael in a beam of light neither of them could afford. Carly has lived long enough with crisis to know that survival sometimes requires choosing the battlefield. If the heat threatens Michael, she will change the weather. She has done it before in different guises, bartering her future for her children's present, taking the brunt so those she loves can step out of the line of fire. People call it reckless self-sacrifice or genius misdirection depending on which side of the courtroom they sit. The truth is simpler. Carly knows her own durability. She knows Donna has Sonny's fortress at her back, Jocelyn is grown and sharpened by loss, and Michael, whatever else he is, can protect himself better from outside a jail cell than from inside one. If the police need a villain for a few days, Carly can stage one. If they need a confession, she can rehearse one until it feels like a memory. That calculus becomes more persuasive because Carly has already served as a lightning rod for other people's storms. Drew once shouldered a prison sentence to shield her during the SEC debacle and the fallout from Nina's maneuvers. That precedent lodges in Carly's mind like a stone she can't spit out. By her code, love tallies in deeds, not declarations. If Drew, infuriating, self-righteous, and wounded, could mortgage a chunk of his life for her freedom, then the ledger demands she pay at least as much for her child. In other words, if someone must be handcuffed in a hallway under humming fluorescent lights, she will make sure the cuffs fit her wrists. Of course, Carly never steps into a fight without weapons of her own. She has Diane Miller's surgical mind to split legal hairs until the rope of a case frays. She has an instinct for leverage, and she's already gaming the angles. A crime of passion is narratively credible and legally containable. A mother cornered, an argument overheard, a moment of red haze. She even wonders whether Brennan's reach through the WSB could be bent into a narrow escape hatch, perhaps not an absolution, but a mitigation. Carly has endured Pentonville and knows its rhythms. She can survive a short stint if it keeps Michael's record unsullied. She would hate the walls. She would hate the institutional time. But she would accept it the way she accepts winter, as a season she can outlast. Meanwhile, Anna's investigation presses forward with the relentless fairness that both comforts and terrifies. If the firearm is a plant, then someone chose Liz precisely because she is credible and unsuspecting, an excellent hiding place because no one would think to look there, until someone made sure the police had a reason to return. That scenario invites a second, harsher inference. The plan's author is counting on the PCPD to do their work well. Plant the gun in a home that appears beyond reproach, let whispers place the right names in the wrong setting, and let law enforcement uncover exactly what they were meant to find. Liz becomes a chess square, not a player, which is exactly why Anna is determined to restore her agency by identifying whoever moved the piece. Standing in a different corridor of power, Drew Kane cultivates a narrative of accountability that looks, from a certain vantage, like vengeance in business attire. His fixation on Michael as the shooter who felled him is so single-minded that it blurs the larger danger. If someone attacked Drew once, they could try again. Yet he shows little appetite for hunting the ghost behind the muzzle. His appetite is focused on a very living target. Some of that is personal. Drew's bitterness toward Carly now tinctures every decision. If Michael suffers, it wounds Carly. If Carly suffers, it underlines Drew's new identity as the man who will no longer bleed for her. This is politics, but it is also heartbreak styled as principle. There is also the quiet arithmetic of custody swirling beneath the criminal storm. Drew knows that if the suspicion sticks to either Carly or Michael, Willow's posture before any family court instantly strengthens. Stability becomes the moral currency, and he believes he can offer it by erasing the Corinthos chaos from the children's daily horizon. In that calculus, an accusation, much less a conviction, doesn't just reframe a shooting, it redraws a household. Wiley and Amelia become the stakes that justify almost any legal gambit. Cynics call that opportunism. Drew would call it protection, even if the protection comes wrapped in a headline that scorches people he once loved. Carly's contemplated strategy, tilting the spotlight onto herself, threatens to give Drew exactly what he wants without breaking Michael. If she pleads to something dramatic but bounded, if she paints the moment as a combustible cocktail of fear and fury, Drew can leverage his status to ensure that her time behind bars is neither symbolic nor short. He can speak in the hushed tones of concern while maneuvering in the clattering world of influence, all the while congratulating himself that his hands merely guided justice, toward its proper destination. Carly would know this and might do it anyway. She has never needed her adversary's approval to perform an act of devotion that looks, to outsiders, like ruin. For Anna, the task is to separate choreography from panic. She will test chain of custody on the weapon, comb the digital exhaust around the moments when the PCPD left Liz's house and prepared to return, and interrogate motive without letting history fill in answers that evidence must supply. She will ask where Michael was, who he called, who can place him in rooms that explain his sudden philanthropic impulse about Willow's access. She will ask when Carly learned about the gun, and how her subsequent movements align with fear or foresight. She will interview Liz not as a suspect but as a timeline, someone whose normal day was invaded by a plot that required her silence to succeed. Carly, for her part, will stage manage guilt like a theater professional. She can revive old threats, remind anyone within earshot that she once vowed violence against the man who betrayed her, allow indignation to double as confession when the right audience gathers. None of that proves anything, but in a town where memory and myth often substitute for proof, it might be enough to tug the current in her chosen direction. Diane will try to restrain this impulse, insisting that strategy demands patience, not pyrotechnics. But patience has never been Carly's art. Motion is. And when her children's futures are on the line, she becomes a force of nature that even her lawyers must learn to surf rather than stop. The community will do what communities do, whisper. Some will decide Michael's appearance at Liz's house was a son's desperate cleanup operation for his mother's explosion. Others will believe Michael stumbled into a trap whose claws he never saw. A third camp will argue that all of them, Carly, Michael, Drew, are drowning in narratives they wrote years ago and can't seem to escape. But the only story that matters to Anna is the one that can be proved in court. She will not let grief, grudges, or parental sacrifice write the ending. She will let ballistic patterns, text metadata, doorbell cameras, and the thin, stubborn truth of timestamps tell her where the gun began and how it found its way into Liz's quiet life. And yet, there is a darker symmetry tugging at the edges. If Carly succeeds in making herself the center, then the real architect of the plant, assuming there is one, gets to vanish back into the crowd. If Drew succeeds in narrowing the lens to Michael, then the assassin who leveled a weapon at a congressman walks free, emboldened. If Michael tries to be heroic and silent, he becomes a magnet for the kind of suspicion that thrives on stoicism. Everyone's noblest instinct, protect the people you love, can become the very fog that allows the villain to disappear between streetlights. Port Charles has seen this trick before. It always ends the same way, with someone bleeding and someone else asking why nobody followed the simplest lead when they had it in their hands. In the days ahead, the decisions will compound. Carly will choose whether to play martyr or let the process breathe. Michael will decide whether to invite scrutiny with transparency or to repel it with silence. Drew will judge whether his quest for accountability is justice or jealousy in better clothes. And Anna will keep doing the one thing that makes all their performances irrelevant. She will measure what happened against what can be proved, then carry that weight into a courtroom where stories become sentences. If the gun was planted, she will find the planter. If the visits were a smokescreen, she will trace the smoke to the match. And if Carly steps forward with a confession crafted as a shield, Anna will test it not as an act of love but as a claim about the past, because in Port Charles, love may move mountains, but only evidence moves juries. The drama is riveting because every path contains a wound. If Carly sacrifices herself, she confirms the legend her enemies whisper, that she is chaos dressed as devotion. If Michael is charged, he becomes the heir to a cycle of violence he has tried so hard to break. If Drew presses too hard, he risks revealing that the righteous man he claims to be is, in this instance, simply a man who hurts, and wants others to hurt in a way that makes his pain feel organized. And in the middle of it all, Liz, who asked for none of this, must live with the knowledge that her home was used as a stage for somebody else's scheme. That, more than anything, is the cruelty of the moment. Innocent spaces turned into exhibits, innocent routines turned into alibis, a nurse's sanctuary converted into the hinge of a case that could rearrange several lives at once. By the time the first motions are filed and the first headlines harden, one truth will have emerged with uncomfortable clarity. The person who planned the timing, not just the plant, but the arrivals and the exits, understands the human weaknesses of everyone involved. They banked on a mother's terror, a son's loyalty, an ex-lover's resentment, a detective's hunger for sequence. They trusted that fear would do as much work as fingerprints. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps fear is the most efficient accomplice in Port Charles. But if that is true, then the only antidote is courage of a more disciplined kind. The courage to wait, to test, to reject the seduction of easy guilt. That is Anna's gift. And if she succeeds, the city will be reminded of an old lesson in a new case. Love may bend, rage may flare, ambition may scheme, but facts, patiently assembled, outlast them all.